Hello, thank you for being in a new video. This time I have with you the review of the Realme GT6. Let's get started. This device is part of Realme's high-end range, which has generally had an interesting approach to Mexico, but had not had its high-end device in recent years. The Realme C series is very simple, honestly not that attractive. The eponymous series is much more attractive, but we will find the most interesting in this GT series. So, how about joining me to get to know it, since we will also see a very interesting price proposal. In Mexico, its official price is 10,999 pesos is distributed through Mercado Libre. That is approximately $610, although remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. Honestly, it seems to me a very competitive price. We will find many competing devices in this same price range, but it can stand out for several aspects. So, what do you think if you join me to know it in detail below? Let's start talking about the design. On the front, we will find curved screen, and in this case, curiously, they bet to include Gorilla Glass Victus 2. And this seems very curious to me because Realme had recently incorporated in other devices its own glass that is quite thick and resists very well the falls and everything. So I find it very strange that in this case they bet on Gorilla Glass Victus 2, which is a resistant glass anyway, but I find it curious because Realme had already developed a glass also very good resistance. But we will find then a good level of resistance against falls and scratches on the front, despite being a curved screen that is usually perceived as a more delicate screen. On the right side we find the volume buttons and the power button. At the top is a microphone along with infrared and a secondary audio output. While the left side is completely clean, and as always in this profile view, we take the opportunity to tell you that it is 8.6 millimeters thick. This device weighs 199 grams, so it could be classified as a more or less light and thin device, considering that we are talking about a device that pretends to be high-end. On the bottom, we will find 4 perforations for the speaker. We also find the USB-C port, plus another microphone, and finally we find the tray where we will be able to place 2 nano SIM cards, although remember that this may vary depending on some countries. The device integrates the IP55 level of resistance against water and dust, that is to say that it can withstand splashes and resist dust very well. It does not have a level that ensures that it can be submerged to a much more noticeable depth, but if you happen to drop it in a slight depth, I think it will resist without problem as long as you get it out of the water quickly. However, I think that here it may fall a little short compared to what we are seeing in other manufacturers that from this price and begin to incorporate a higher level of resistance against water. In this case, I have the green color edition, which as you'll notice doesn't have such an intense saturation. It looks like a sort of olive green that comes with a dual finish. Realme calls it a nano mirror design, as the top has a super reflective finish that looks very similar to a mirror, while the rest of the back body anyway looks reflective, although not as much. Personally, you already know that I like matte designs more. In this case, the fingerprints and your fingers get to mark a little more than I would like, although if you are going to use a case on this cell phone, you will not notice this kind of inconvenience. The screen has a size of 6.78 inches. We're talking about an AMOLED panel, obviously, because it's flexible. The resolution is 1264 by 2780 pixels. So it's a little bit more than Full HD+. We could call it 1.2K or something similar. It gives us 450 pixels per inch in its density. So yes, we're going to notice a very detailed image, especially in text. We're going to notice very good sharpness, even in small text. Yeah, this panel is LTPO. This means that its refresh rate can vary from 1 to 120 Hz. In simple words, if you are watching some static content that has no movements, the screen will update its content every second so that it does not consume so much battery, and on the contrary, if you have movement or animations, it will be able to update its screen 120 times in a single second, so the movements look super smooth. Plus, its peak brightness is 6000 nits. It's an exaggeratedly bright display, although this peak is specifically when you're watching HDR content. So in some areas of the screen it might actually emit a brightness of this level. In fact, the display also supports Pro XDR technology, so the pictures that you take can also have some areas that are brighter and some areas that are darker, so it gives you a very realistic feel when you're reviewing the pictures that you're capturing. So it seems to me that it's a really very good and very competitive display. The high brightness will be very good, but it does have one little flaw, the lowest brightness, which I feel like at night it won't be as low as we might notice on other devices because it doesn't have the extra dimming option within the accessibility options that we do find on most devices from other brands. It's a small detail, but hopefully they will add it with an update. It's not really a big deal because the minimum brightness is considerably low, but on other devices you can lower it even more. And regarding the software, note that we are going to find different types of color calibration for you to choose specifically the one you like the most. Personally, I think that in vivid mode we have a good quality, but as you realize it has many options to customize your viewing experience. We will also find the eye care mode, which is going to be adapting throughout the night. And in fact, interestingly, they also now integrate an eye care mode with artificial intelligence, which is supposedly able to detect eye fatigue through the camera. I personally don't know how accurate it can get, but the option exists. And something I also love is that it integrates the natural hue display mode. This means that the screen will try to match the white color of the environment so that it looks good. If the environment has warm light, the screen will get a little bit warmer. And if the environment has cool light, the screen will do the same. Something that very few Android devices currently have. That's why I like to highlight it as a strong point. Obviously, it also lets you adjust the resolution, depending on how you want it to take advantage of the screen and also the refresh rate. The device incorporates stereo sound with a speaker at the bottom, which is the main one, and another at the top that has two outputs, the one in the frame and in the earpiece area for calls. The volume is quite high, and that may be one of its most attractive points. The quality is as expected, nothing exaggeratedly high, but for the price I think it is something that is within what we expect. In this case, it does not incorporate Dolby Atmos, but it does have a technology developed by the whole group of Oppo, Realme and more called All Reality Audio, where you have several presets of content styles and specifically within the music profile. When you have headphones connected, you have a 10-band equalizer available, but if you don't have headphones, this option disappears. The device also incorporates features such as spatial audio, so that it can be directed from different angles when you are using headphones, and it also has a feature called hollow audio, which is going to be very similar, giving you a sense that the sound is coming from different directions. This device is hi-res audio certified, so it should give you good sound quality through headphones as well, although it doesn't have a headphone jack. So you should use headphones with the USB-C port or wireless headphones. And in this case, the truth is that there is good news because it does support advanced high-quality audio codecs such as aptX, LHDC, and LDAC. So it has all the necessary codices to enjoy a very good experience when using wireless headphones, if your headphones are compatible. In this case, it incorporates two microphones to capture stereo sound. It does not go beyond that. Let's listen to a test.
Esta es una prueba de audio grabada utilizando los micrófonos integrados del realme GT6.
Below, we will see a video recorded with this device in a very noisy environment to note its behavior. As you can see, the sound is captured very well in the days of the microphones. It does not have any significant distortion at the time of being in this type of scenario, so it is a good tool for recording concerts. The front camera is 32 megapixels with f-aperture 2.45, does not seem to be so attractive in the aperture and obviously has fixed focus. In this case, it offers two levels of amplitude, 21 and 25 millimeters, and in this case has a mechanism of quick opening of the camera by pressing twice some button off. Volume, but it comes disabled by default, but as you realize immediately enters the urban mode, so you cannot rotate to the front camera. You would need to switch to photo mode and then switch to the front camera. So it doesn't seem to be as snappy when trying to take a picture of you. The camera is going to have a good response speed, not too fast or anything, but it really doesn't disappoint. In this case, we didn't find any burst, and I forgot to mention to you that there is also another gesture by drawing a letter O with the screen off to access the camera. But if you are doing anything else in other applications, you will not be able to open with some special gesture the camera. We will find a button to load different filters that we can preview in real time, and we will also find several beauty options with many parameters available to modify our face. This is how I see myself with all the options enabled to the maximum. This camera I definitely liked, shows a good level of detail and good color. There is no doubt that it is a camera that is very well positioned. It practically looks like a high-end camera. It has two settings, one at 21mm and one at 25mm in case you want to get a slightly closer perspective. In both cases, the level of detail is good, but because of the good level of range you have with the 21mm setting, it might be useful for framing yourself in some scenarios where you want more of the background to show up. Even for group photography, I think it still has a wide perspective. It's not an ultra-wide camera, but it does fit 3 people pretty much at the same distance, even though it's a fixed focus camera. So if you're very close to it, you're not going to get good detail, but from far away at a good distance with your arm outstretched, you do get good detail. However, notice how objects that are far away will also appear out of focus. Indoors, I like the result. We have good contrast and sufficiently saturated colors, although it is no longer perceived as a photograph of such quality as outdoors, but that is normal. Note how in backlight the preview still doesn't look optimized, but after taking the picture the result is much nicer in terms of light and shadow balance, although the color looks slightly strange, but consider that it was a fairly intense backlight scenario. Overall, the result is positive. In the evenings, if you have some good enough light source nearby, the result is going to be very good. The level of detail is correct, definitely doing a good job. Even backlit at night, the result is still positive, although as you realize, it might come out a bit more blurry compared to a direct light setting, but even backlit at night, it comes out well. And portraits at night are also nice, generating this quite natural blur effect in the background. Although in our test during the day, we noticed that it's not able to keep the foreground objects in focus well, so it's not that advanced for front portrait photography. The rear photographic system is composed of 3 cameras. First, we find the ultra-wide camera, which is 16mm with 8 megapixels, f2.2 aperture and fixed focus. Then we find the main camera of 23mm with f1.69 aperture, 50 megapixels autofocus and optical stabilization. Obviously it is the most attractive, and then we find the telephoto camera of 47mm, that is optical sum 2x. It offers us a 50 megapixel sensor, its aperture is 2.0 and has autofocus. The incorporation of the telephoto camera is a very good thing in this price range. As always, the preview will present a bit of a delay, and its performance is quite curious because it is quite easy to capture the exact moment. Although in the preview it seems to take a bit longer than it should, but then it seems to make a bit of a strange correction and you end up capturing the exact moment. In fact, the device features an action mode that supposedly allows you to take the pictures with much more speed or movements, although in a moment of tails its results. In this case, the device is capable of taking a burst of up to 200 pictures, although it takes almost half a second to start the burst. But after that, the space between one photograph and another is very short. So if you could manage to capture an exact moment, you simply have to start the burst a bit in advance. If you tap on the screen, you can adjust the focus and exposure. You can even lock it with this lock, and you can also access the Pro mode, where you will find more manual settings such as ISO, which can go up to 3200. We will also find the shutter speed that can reach up to 30 seconds, and also compensation, focus and white balance. In fact, this camera also allows us to capture photos in RAW and RAW+. And by the way, also in the urban mode we are going to find other options. For example, we will find explicitly the focal lengths of these lenses, and we will also find an automatic zoom option that personally I have never found very useful, but it would allow you to stay framed in some moving scenarios. In this urban mode, we also have a button to select the type of focus we want, although it seems very curious because it would be duplicating some functions of the manual mode. To scan a document, it is necessary to enter the text scanner mode, where it will automatically detect and cut the sheets. However, it's a simple scan. It's just a cropped photograph, so it doesn't incorporate color optimization, details, nor can you add more pages or anything like that. And it also includes a QR code scanner directly from the main camera interface. Let's take a look at the photographic results. First, we're reviewing the high resolution mode, which definitely does get to take good advantage of the sensor information. It looks a well-detailed picture and evidently handles light and color well too. Although you can use the high resolution mode with the telephoto camera, it's not recommended as much due to the fact that it doesn't handle lighting very well in this mode. But if you're in an evenly lit environment, you might be able to get a good result in level of detail with the high resolution mode. In fast-moving pictures, I want you to notice how the ultra-wide camera does a good job. The main camera also does a good job. It doesn't seem to have too much trouble with this scene when you're in good light. The one that has more complications is the telephoto camera, which, as you notice, it seems that it is not able to keep the movements well defined. The device has an action mode where we have a very similar result with the main camera, but with the telephoto camera, curiously, it is still not able to improve the level of detail in these movements. Outdoors, you will notice that the ultra-wide camera does generate some distortions and quite a bit of chromatic aberration at the edges, so it seems that it is a camera that does not reach such a high level of detail. I think it doesn't have as much quality as we would have liked, but I don't think that's its main focus. Also, it has a little bit more reddish tonality. The main camera doesn't generate as much distortion or chromatic aberration at the edges, so it's a camera that overall performs much better. And the 47mm camera outdoors, oddly enough, you're going to notice that it doesn't have as good an exposure. In this case, we weren't evaluating backlighting, but you notice how some of the brighter areas come out quite overexposed, especially if you compare it to the result that the main camera had given us. So this could be corrected with an update that hopefully they will send. And here the good news is that it takes advantage of the high resolution sensor of the telephoto camera, so by applying a crop inside the sensor, it is able to give you a 91mm picture while maintaining optical quality. So the zoom seems to be one of its strongest points, especially for the price range in which it competes. I think it is one of the best options if you are looking for a device that gives you a good zoom in conjunction with other strong things that this cell phone has. In fact, interestingly enough, in this setting, it performed better in backlight. Let's take a general look at the full zoom range that this device supports. Here you're looking at the 16mm picture with the ultra-wide camera, now 23mm, where again you have to simply note that there's a significant difference in coloration. The ultra-wide camera is a little bit warmer. Now let's go to the 47mm camera, which is 2x optical zoom, then obviously we'll have a good level of detail. It definitely doesn't seem to be suffering. Next, the 91mm photograph, and in this specific case, it does seem to have suffered a little bit more than it should have, especially because there's backlighting. So maybe in backlighting it starts to suffer, and the maximum zoom it allows is 20x, where it definitely still performs well. So I insist that specifically talking about zoom, it's one of the best devices in the range. Indoors, the ultra-wide camera performs well. I like that it has well-defined colors, good contrast is seen, and in fact there is also little presence of noise, something to highlight for being an ultra-wide camera. The main camera has a very similar performance. In this case, we do not see so much difference in coloration between the main camera and the ultra-wide camera, and the telephoto camera seems to have a slightly cooler tonality, but it still retains a good light input. The fact that it has f2 0-point aperture helps it tremendously in retaining a good light input and therefore performing well even in these scenarios where there is not so much illumination. With the 91mm setting applying the crop on the sensor, it doesn't seem to have as good a quality as we were seeing outdoors, but it's still a good photograph. In backlit scenarios, notice that the preview still doesn't look optimized, so it appears to be overexposed. But after taking the pictures, it does a better job of processing. The ultra-wide camera, I think, achieves a good performance still. The main camera too, although it seems to me to oversaturate the colors a bit too much. But the shadow area seems to be well exposed, just that the saturation is slightly above what I would have liked. Even the telephoto lens in this much more intense backlit scenario does seem to balance highlights and shadows well, unlike in light backlit scenes as we saw a moment ago, but at the 91mm setting is where you'll see the device completely forgets to balance highlights and shadows, although this could be corrected with an update. However, I love the 91mm result because of the good level of detail it achieves. At night, the performance remains very consistent across all focal length settings. For example, the ultra-wide camera, you are going to notice that it has a very good performance, although in this case with the night mode, since without the night mode, you will notice that it gets to burn a little more the more exposed areas. The same will happen with the main camera. If you do not use the night mode, the most illuminated area may burn, giving a slightly bad result, but with the night mode, this is completely corrected. What I like is that the shadow area remains very well lit, well detailed, and with little presence of noise. With the 47mm camera, the result is going to be equally positive, both with night mode and auto mode. With the 91mm setting, the result it is able to achieve at night is remarkable. Then even in low light conditions, the zoom theme behaves well. However, in much darker conditions, where there is no light source nearby, the ultra-wide camera definitely suffers too much in these environments. Notice that the main camera improves tremendously in this regard and also shows us that it was an extreme light condition. And if you try to zoom in these kinds of extremely dark conditions, it's actually going to use digital zoom and it's not going to use the telephoto camera. That's because the main camera has an f aperture at a 69 point, which allows you more light in. So this device manages its cameras well. For macro photography, the main camera performs well. I like that it maintains a good level of detail and good color saturation without the need for an unusable macro camera. And if you try to zoom in, you'll notice that it's still using the main camera since the telephoto camera has no macro capabilities. And by the way, the device remembers that it also allows us to capture photos in panorama mode with good resolution, so you also have a good performance. In fact, I like that it does a good balance of highlights and shadows, so you have an excellent dynamic range and excellent color management even within the panorama mode. And finally, portrait photography is also going to perform with good quality. Notice how it is able to detect objects that are in the foreground. Not with 100% accuracy. The most difficult areas it does not manage to specify, but it is something honestly quite complicated which we would only demand from premium devices. The good news is that it allows us to take portrait shots with the 8mm setting, which gives us a much more professional telephoto perspective. The bokeh effect generated in the background is also going to be very nice. I would love it if it allowed us to take portrait shots at 91mm, which would give us a super professional perspective. But in this case, it doesn't allow us to do that. For video recording, note that it could go up to 60 frames per second with both the main camera and the telephoto camera. However, the ultra-wide camera has as maximum quality Full HD at 30 frames per second. Within the video recording interface, note that we can enable an HDR mode with Dolby Vision, also an ultra steady mode, and at the bottom we also find other buttons to enable some special color filter. Although these filters are not compatible with the resolution in 4K, but only in Full HD. Similarly, we have facial retouching options but not compatible with 4K, but only with Full HD and with a single slider. On the other hand, we also have a button to enable the blur effect in the background with a kind of portrait mode, again compatible only with Full HD resolution. When you start recording video, notice that we find a button to take pictures, also a button to pause and resume our content, and another button to turn on the flashlight without the need to stop our video recording. What we do not find is a button to rotate to the front camera, but note as if we have some quick shortcuts to move between zoom and also becomes a very comfortable sliding ring. There is also a movie mode where we will find the manual settings for video recording, so fortunately yes, we can move this kind of thing even while we are recording the video. For video recording, we will notice that the ultra-wide camera outdoors has a good behavior, although in this case it does not allow us the quality of the 4K camera, and that from my point of view is a disadvantage considering the price range, although it is not something normal, but I would have liked to see this quality supported in this lens. Obviously, the main camera will have better quality, colors look slightly more saturated than normal, but definitely if you like this intensity, you might enjoy it. The advantage here is the resolution and the level of detail it achieves, plus we don't see it struggling with white balance or exposure, at least in these simple scenes, so we're going to find good quality. And switching to the telephoto camera, we can see that it also manages to maintain this 4K recording quality and a very similar color representation, so it seems to me that it maintains a consistent quality between the main camera and the telephoto camera, although the ultra-wide camera has a lower quality, but in general the quality of the video recording seems very nice to me. Indoors, the ultra-wide camera is going to have much more noise present, although the closer you get to the dark areas, the more it tries to regulate this amount of noise, but it definitely does not have a good light input, and that also causes the level of detail to be low and the colors to be a bit pale. On the other hand, the main camera has a much better performance, handles noise better, has better detail, better color, so it is highly recommended to record with this camera, although in slightly faster movements it could reveal a little more noise than we would like, but it is really nothing serious. The telephoto camera has a lower light input due to its aperture, so if you shoot with this camera indoors, you're going to notice a slightly darker scene, but it still handles noise well, although you do get to notice a bit of graininess, but I definitely think it still manages to maintain good quality when zooming in. In backlit conditions, you notice that when the ultra-wide camera detects the face, it will burn out the background completely, and when it doesn't, it will maintain a slightly more balanced view. With the main camera, the result is much better. Notice how it has an almost perfect balance between light and shadow even when it detects the face. So it is highly recommended to record with this camera. The result is too good, honestly, although again the colors seem to me a little more saturated than normal. And with the telephoto camera, again has the same performance that we saw with the ultra wide camera. We will notice a completely overexposed background when it comes to detect the face, so it is not so advisable to record with the alternative cameras, but only with the main camera in backlit scenarios. Interestingly, it also has an HDR recording mode, although obviously to play it you need a compatible screen, but honestly I do not find it as attractive as the automatic mode. At night we can already anticipate that the ultra-wide camera is not going to have such a pleasant behavior due to the low light input that it may have, so in the darkest areas it will generate some noise, although fortunately if you have an area with enough light the result will be attractive. But obviously the main camera is going to have a much better performance, raising the level of detail and raising the color in these types of night recordings. So just like we saw in the indoor shot and the backlight shot, the main camera really excels in video recording, especially when you compare it to the other cameras. So it's not such an advanced video system because it's only recommended to record with the main camera and in some scenarios with the telephoto camera. In fact, if you try to record with the telephoto camera at night, it really looks like it will only apply a kind of digital zoom. It doesn't seem to have as much detail as we would have imagined. Stabilization with the ultra-wide camera is simple. Obviously, because of the width of the lens, movement can be a little more disguised, but even when walking or running, if you get to notice a little more movement than we would like. With the main camera, we will find a higher level of stabilization because when walking you notice a very good quality. Although when running you may notice a little more compensation movement, but actually if you have a very good stabilization again with the main camera. Even with the telephoto camera, you can see that we find a good stabilization so that when walking we see a good movement. When running, obviously it will cost much more for being a telephoto camera, but honestly I quite like the level of stabilization that reaches even in this telephoto camera. And obviously we will also find a super stable mode that will be in full HD at 60 frames per second using the ultra wide camera, so you can have a scene when you go running much more stable. Then it is advisable to use it, although I like the result in 4K with the main camera that was also very good. This device incorporates a portrait recording mode, blurring the background, although the result looks super artificial, very simple in this case with the main camera. It is very noticeable, a very inaccurate edge detection. In this case it is much better to be close to the camera to have a slightly more accurate detection, although the level of blur does not vary depending on your distance. Fortunately, it maintains the effect even if it does not detect your face, but it does not keep the objects in focus, so it is a recording that we could call simple. The curious thing is that it also allows you to record in this mode using the telephoto lens, having a much more professional perspective, but again we see a bit of difficulty at the edges, so you do not get to perceive a portrait mode of such high quality. However, for the price range, I think it is very positive that it integrates this recording mode. It also incorporates a fast camera mode that is stabilized. It can go from 10x, which I think is good enough to record movements of people walking or something like that, and can go up to 960x, with which you could record in a spectacular way some landscape or something similar. Also, in this case, it can be 4K quality, which is also remarkable. This camera also integrates a slow motion mode. It can be in about 240 frames per second with full HD resolution, although curiously it also allows you this setting of 240 frames per second in HD resolution, but I do not see the point if you can record with more resolution at this same slowness. So the result looks good. For the price, I think it's somewhat correct, and in fact it also has a 480 frames per second camera mode that is a super slow motion that also looks attractive. Honestly, it is a very nice result that not many devices integrate at this price, so it could be one of its strong points. Finally, as other parameters of the video recording, please note how the focus does it quickly and correctly. It does not seem to have difficulties when having these abrupt changes in the scenes. The focus holds well, even in slightly more subtle movements. It also maintains a fast and agile focus that is not hesitating. And with respect to the zoom, note that when recording with the ultra-wide camera in Full HD, it will allow you to make the transition between the three lenses. In this case, it offers us a maximum zoom of 10x, which maintains good stabilization, so it's fine. On the other hand, if you shoot in 4K, you won't be able to use the ultra-wide camera, but you still get the same 10x range, since it does use a telephoto camera, so it's not such a spectacular zoom for video recording, but it's fine. This front camera records with a good level of detail, the resolution is very good, so you do see a very sharp image, but unfortunately backlit does not get to give us a good experience. Something curious is that it allows us to have two amplitude settings. There is not much difference between them, so in general we could say that it is a camera that meets according to what we could expect in this price range. However, in backlight, as you are seeing, it is not able to perform well because it is going to completely burn the most illuminated areas of the image in this type of scenarios. Indoors, you're going to notice that there is a greater presence of grain, which if you stay a little more static starts to disappear, but as soon as there is movement, it returns to show much more noise. In general, it maintains color saturation well, but it doesn't seem to be an expert in this subject. At night, if you are near a light source, you will have a very similar result to what we saw indoors. Note that noise can appear and disappear depending on whether there is a lot of movement or not. In nighttime backlighting, it's obviously not going to be able to do a good job, and if you go to a much darker scene, I think it makes a good effort to try to gather light, but obviously it's not its specialty. In fact, it also doesn't let you turn the screen on to illuminate like a flash, so that could be improved. It has a fast camera mode with the same configuration as the rear camera. Fortunately, it does seem to have some level of stabilization, and interestingly, it also has a portrait recording mode, which is unusual for devices in this range, especially on the front camera. So this we could highlight as a good feature, although it doesn't quite detect objects in the foreground. So if you are close to an object, the result will come out a bit strange, but if only your body comes out, the result can look attractive. It also has a dual recording mode with which you can show the rear camera and the front camera at the same time, although it seems to go at a bit shorter bit rate than we would like. And this circle that can also be rectangle, you can move it across the screen, although it has a small stop on the right, and fortunately it does have focus enabled. It also has zoom enabled, although obviously it's not going to change between different lenses, but it does allow you to move this parameter a little bit. As I said, you also have this same mode in rectangular format in case you prefer this view with exactly the same behavior. And to rotate the view, you have to have the recording and start it again, so in that aspect it could still improve. It doesn't seem to give us as advanced an experience as we've seen on other devices, but I like that this mode is available. And by the way, even though the rear camera is set to small, it also has focus and zoom enabled. And finally, you can also have split screen mode to show both cameras in the same size, again with focus and zoom enabled. So overall, the experience is good. This device incorporates Android 14 with realme UI 5.0, so we have the latest from both realme and Android, and that's good news. It already comes factory upgraded, and you are also promised 3 years of software updates with 4 years of security patches, which is good, although it's not the most advanced on the market, but I think it's enough to maintain a good experience and a good product lifespan. And in this case, it's a very stable operating system, and it adds several interesting features as well. We have an advanced customization center, you can modify the shape of the icon, the color palette of the system, and some other little things. It also includes an always-on display mode where you can select some different covers. The highlight here would be that it can connect to your Snapchat Bitmoji, so you can put a sort of caricature of yourself. And it has some other covers, although it doesn't have some special store where you can download more covers. It also has an edge lighting feature that will take advantage of the curved screen to have an animation when receiving some notifications. And something curious is that on the home screen you can make a gesture by sliding from one of the sides so that all the icons contract and can be much more within reach of your hand. This is something I have not seen in other operating systems. Interestingly, it also has air gesture control, which using the camera you can put your hand in front of you and try to control your device. Honestly, that's a lot of gestures. It's the most advanced navigation I've seen of this style because it allows you to go to the home screen by doing this gesture or open the list of recent apps, go backwards, navigate by scrolling vertically and horizontally. So it definitely has a lot of options in this aspect, although I think that where you will use it most will probably be scrolling in social networks. And it's a gesture that works well. I always highlight if, for example, you put your cell phone and you have wet hands or you're eating, and it's going to be much easier to navigate your phone without touching it. In fact, it has such advanced navigation that you can even show your index finger and somehow try to have a cursor on the screen. Although it's honestly very awkward, I don't think it's a feature you're really going to use, but it's available and I haven't seen it on other devices. It also includes an artificial intelligence recognition option, so you could enable through a gesture on the screen a recognition of everything on top of it. Although there is a list of compatible applications where this gesture, if it will respond, and in the rest of applications not. Although manually you can force some applications to try to use this, but it will not work in all. As I say, once you enable this, it will scan the text and images of the application, and then you can drag it to a kind of ring where some suggested applications will appear. For example, if you drag an image, you could directly share that image with some other contact, or you could even drag that image to Google Lens, for example, and search for more information about that image. In fact, you can supposedly also drag text to this ring, and for example, you can drag it to Google Maps to directly start navigating to that address that has been sent to you via the message. I don't consider it to be that convenient because it requires several steps when trying to activate and select the text. The text is very difficult to select, possibly they will correct it with an update, but for now it seems to me a function that is a good idea, but it is still not so well implemented. Also, these texts could be dragged to the calendar, for example, and if you were sent details of an event such as time or place, it will automatically fill in that information in your calendar. But it's a very similar way to have circle to search, which is one of the features that Google Maps has been promoting lately in conjunction with Samsung. So you could drag an image into Google Lens and then select a specific snippet. It requires a bit more steps, and overall the experience strikes me as not as convenient as it should be, but it might work for you. We are also going to find a sidebar where you can access to a kind of clipboard where you can have some images or documents. You can also see your recent documents, and from this panel you can drag these kind of documents or images to other applications to send them quickly. So it can be convenient as well. It also has an on-screen translator directly from this bar that will translate the content of any application. Something that can be very useful if you suddenly go on a trip and you are installing applications in another language. And from this sidebar, you can also open applications in floating window mode. These windows can be resized, positioned elsewhere, but you can only open one application at a time and not all applications are supported. So in this sense, still the experience feels a bit plain. For example, neither YouTube nor Instagram support this option. So there are a few apps that you can really take advantage of here. Although if you combine it with split screen, you could have up to 3 apps running at the same time. We also have one-handed use mode available, but it only scales vertically. So side content may be hard to reach still. And it also incorporates some experimental features within Realme Lab, like having mono audio, or also the ability to monitor your heart rate using the fingerprint reader inside the display. In the gallery, you can also select several images to create some collage with different layouts, all seamlessly integrated there. And you could also get to generate a GIF with different speeds of animations and other things. In fact, it also has an option to extract the images as a kind of sticker just by holding down on this image. You could even drag it to other applications, as we had already seen a moment ago, or you could add it to your library of stickers that are available within the photo editor. Inside the editor, we're also going to find a smart eraser with generative artificial intelligence. So it's not only going to try to fill in with surrounding patterns, but it's going to try to imagine what would exist behind it. It honestly doesn't seem like the most advanced artificial intelligence to me. It might require several steps to give you a much more acceptable result, but it's something that's available. So with an app, you can simply select what brand your TV is, and after a little tutorial, have all the controls on your cell phone. There is also the Zen space, where you can configure which applications are going to be allowed and which applications are going to be disabled. You can block all kinds of notifications to relax for a while, or also to concentrate and disable applications that distract you. Finally, I must emphasize that this operating system makes great use of the optical engine that it has, which in this case is on the X-axis, so it gives you a very good feedback in your hand. When interacting with buttons and sliders, you're going to have this premium feedback in the hand. So in that sense, it's a very good experience. As I anticipated, it offers a fingerprint detector inside the screen that will give us a good response. It will be fast and allows you up to 5 different records, so it complies well. It also has facial unlocking, but it is only in 2 dimensions. We will not focus too much on that because it is simple. And it also offers extended unlock so that in some places or while you're connected to some watch, it stays unlocked and you don't have to be constantly putting your fingerprint or your pattern. It also includes a feature called payment protection that allows you to have a more secure and more hermetic environment when making a payment compatible with some applications only. This technology is developed directly by Realme and Oppo with all its group, but in other things still depend on Google, as in the password manager. So if you want to have this option, it is available, and fortunately it does verify through your fingerprint before autofilling forms. It also has app lock option, private safe, and you can even hide some apps that you can later show with some particular fingerprint. So I think it does have some pretty advanced features in terms of security and privacy. It also has an option to clone the system and have more or less 2 phones in one, each with its own applications and its own documents. In fact, it also has a child mode, so you could lend your cell phone with more confidence to a little one. You can set different parameters so that it has several restrictions and can't get out of there. It doesn't have a VPN that makes Realme cool, but you can use third-party VPNs, and it does integrate an antivirus that you can actually select which engine you want to use, Avast or Avira, depending on who you trust the most, so that it can scan for any malware application. So it does not depend only on Google Play Protect, but where it does depend only on Google is if you get to lose your phone, because it does have the function to find my device, but it is only Google. Realme does not have any option created by themselves. The battery is 5,500 mAh. It may sound like an exaggeratedly large battery, which it is, but in practical life it can be very different. So running the battery drainer in the foreground, it came to have nothing more than 3 hours with 8 minutes. Something that can become very short compared to the capacity that is showing us. So if you are going to give it a very intense use, either editing videos or playing games, you will not really perceive that the battery lasts too long. On the other hand, if you are going to give it a little more moderate use, simply with social networks or some other things, it could have a longer life. In this case, while I was playing videos and the drainer was running in the background, it reached 5 hours and 4 minutes, so the time stretches a lot longer. I think it has a very good management of the applications running in the background, so that's why I'm telling you that if you give it much simpler tasks, I think the device does do a very good job. It also has a normal battery saver mode, which can help you obviously on a day-to-day basis, and it also has the super saver mode, where it restricts you a lot more things, and this can be useful in some emergency scenarios or while you're traveling and you don't require so many apps. Definitely that the experience is very good, and in conjunction with its 120-watt charger, you can achieve very attractive things. And what's remarkable is that despite being such a powerful charger, it's actually about the same size as the 67-watt charger that Realme and Oppo run on other devices as well. Using this charger with 15 minutes of putting it on charge, it went up to 57%. So you can really charge it very quickly with a very short session. Within 30 minutes, it was almost 100% charged. It was up to 98%. So practically in half an hour, you charge this cell phone without any problem. So obviously, it would not be advisable to leave it charging overnight. It would not even be necessary. But in case you leave it charging all night, it also has an intelligent charging mode that will turn on your routine and will charge it much slower in case you do this task repeatedly. But it also has a charge lock mode, which can be very useful if you have it plugged in all the time in the car on a long trip to make sure the battery doesn't degrade too quickly. So it charges up to 80% and doesn't go beyond that. So, the battery life is good. If you are not an ultra demanding user, it has good saving modes, it has very good charging, and it has good battery care methods. So, overall, I think it performs very well. The device has 5G connectivity and also has an option for you to manually specify which apps will be able to connect to the internet only over Wi-Fi to avoid bad surprises in your mobile data consumption. It also supports Wi-Fi 6. In this case, it is not offering me such an attractive download speed, but note, now that I repeated the test, it has improved a lot. So, it can actually give you very good download speeds, which again is very useful on a trip when you're in a hurry to download a movie or some songs. In this case, it can do it quickly if your router and internet provider also offer good speed. It has Bluetooth 5.4, maintaining good stability with your accessories. It has NFC for making mobile payments. It has OTG, so you can connect advanced accessories to it via the USB port, but it does not have FM radio, which is common in this price range. It is also capable of projecting its screen wirelessly, and it does it in a good way because it can hide notifications to maintain a good level of privacy, or it can also project with the screen off so it doesn't consume so much battery. So it's very good in this aspect, although it can't do its projection via cable, it obviously integrates Android Auto. And as for the sensors, it also integrates all kinds of sensors that we could ask for, such as geomagnetic field, gyroscope, orientation sensor, and many more. And even the proximity sensor itself is completely physical, so it gives us a very good response. The realme ecosystem currently, I think, has a good amount of devices. It has a good catalog of headsets, a good catalog of watches. It even has tablets. So it has reached a considerably high level of maturity. It also has multi-screen connect technology. So you could use your cell phone from the tablet, even have a shared clipboard and advanced options. So we also have a good level of interaction. Maybe still with the watch there is not such an advanced interaction, but this is growing little by little. However, they still rely on Google in some aspects, such as cloud storage or controlling home devices over the internet. So for that, you will use Google Photos, which is actually integrated directly into the gallery. So directly from the gallery, you can log in and connect your account to back up all your photos there. And in the quick settings panel, you also have direct access to control Google Home devices, showing that in these aspects, as I tell you, they are still very much dependent on Google, which is not so bad, but I would like more that realme gradually go developing their own technologies, although in this case they don't have their own laptop, so in this aspect there is still a bit of a gap in the ecosystem. But you can install an application on your computer, although you must configure everything manually to try to use this cell phone from the computer. Otherwise, it also has all the connectivity integration to Windows already pre-installed, so the configuration would be a little simpler. But ideally, realme should launch its own laptop. Let's go for the app opening test. This device has the Snapdragon 8S Gen 3 processor, which is definitely a high-end processor. Not the most powerful thing out there, but it is a very good chip. It is also accompanied by 12 GB of RAM. There is an alternative 16 version and it also has virtual RAM, with another 12 GB, which I think is unnecessary, but it is available. There are also 256 or 512 GB versions of storage, although in this case I am testing the 1 TB version, but it is not available in Mexico. In fact, I am also testing the 16 GB RAM version. As you can see, it took 2.5 seconds on average to open each application, showing a good power when navigating between these applications. In fact, as I told you, I am testing the version with 16 GB of RAM, so it is an even more powerful version. But from the 12 GB version, I think you could find this same performance, keeping several applications open at the same time. In this aspect, we obviously find one of its strongest points because in this price range, it will be very difficult for you to find a more powerful processor. It is a really very good processor in conjunction with several options that are attractive. That is, it is a device that does not focus exclusively on performance, as we could perhaps find in some other devices, since in this case it maintains a very good screen, good cameras, and together give us an experience very close to that, which could give us much more expensive flagships, so the performance will really be very good. Next, let's test how long it takes to export several clips joined in 4K recorded with this device, which have a total duration of 1 minute. And voila, as you see, it took less than 30 seconds, proving that it has very good power. For games, note that we will find a specific application where we can explore new games to download. We also have a section of quick games that we can run without the need to install them and therefore do not consume internal storage. Or we can also have a visualization of all the games we have installed. When running a game, notice that we will find additional options. Simply swipe from this side to access this special manager where we have shortcuts to some applications that we can run in a floating window mode. We are also going to find the current frames per second counter, and we also have various performance modes. We can have a power saving mode, a balance mode, or a maximum performance mode. Notice that it also has a direct connection to Spotify so you can control your music or your podcast. And we will also find a screen brightness selector plus a focus mode option in the game, so you will avoid any kind of interruption. Even the gesture to enter the special panel is disabled, and we found a mode where we can have the notifications with different styles. Not only with the traditional bubble, but they can also be ribbons running around the screen to avoid any additional interruption. We also find a call blocking mode, eye care, and there's an advanced settings section where we can enable this performance center, and you can specifically tweak the CPU and GPU frequency, something that really few devices allow these days. So it's quite curious, but these are very advanced settings. It also has a button where you can adjust the quality by enabling Hyper HDR, although it's not available in all games, but you can have this kind of special effects on screen with supported games. Obviously, you can take screenshots and screen recordings and also optimize the network to give priority to everything that has to do with your game and improve latency. There is also a button to optimize the on-screen touch response, another button to lock the orientation, and another button to cache the game so that the next time you open it, it runs much faster. There is also a game filter button, so you can have different display styles in this game depending on what you prefer the most, and it also has a button to change your voice through the microphone. There is also a panel where you can keep a constant monitoring of how your game and device is behaving. You can adapt the resolution of the game and you can turn off the screen while the game is downloading content so that it doesn't consume as much battery. You can also adjust the volume directly from this section, and you have another settings section where you can customize how you want this special panel to behave. You can even enable this option so that when you exit your game, it remains somehow running in a sort of floating window. In Call of Duty, this device by default gives very high quality graphics at maximum frame rate. In fact, we can go all the way up to the ultra rate, although the graphics quality drops to the medium level. So it is up to you as a user what you want to prioritize. With graphic quality as a priority, we can enable all kinds of special effects in real time, including experimental functions. And with priority given to the refresh rate, various effects are disabled. So it is up to you as a user. In this case, we first tested giving priority to the graphic quality, and definitely that the experience was very good. It really delivers as a high-end device, and at this price it obviously stands out a lot. The quality is going to be very good, and it also handles its temperature very well. We see that in this case it didn't even get close to 40 degrees Celsius, so it gives us a really very good experience with very good cooling. Obviously, if you want to play games having detailed graphics and also very good frame per second stability, you're going to find it here. Giving priority to the refresh rate, we highlight that at this price point it allows us to get up to 90 frames per second in VR mode with medium quality graphics. So it is definitely very good in this aspect. It's able to give you very good fluidity with very good stability. It has one or two low peaks, but it's really just a normal thing. It doesn't really go down significantly, so the experience is very good. In fact, in this case, its behavior is quite curious because it gradually adapted to reach 80 frames per second to still maintain good stability without getting too hot. So it seems that its management really is very good. It gives you a balance between a very good performance and still a comfortable temperature in the hand. In fact, again, it didn't go above 40 degrees Celsius at this setting, showing us that it has a very good experience even recording the screen. In the Legends game, we changed the automatic setting to an ultra setting at 60 frames per second, which we usually only demand from the most expensive devices on the market. And in this case, again, the experience was good, showing us good stability. Yes, there are some peaks where suddenly the device can suffer a little more than the account, but again, I insist that normally we put this test to much more expensive devices and actually did not have a lower performance than we noticed in other devices. This game usually shows these low peaks from time to time, and again, even recording the screen, we noticed that the device stays considerably cool considering that we had already run some content before. In the SpongeBob game by default has the low resolution and high quality, something very curious. But if you allow us to raise it in this case, we went up to epic quality, epic resolution at 60 frames per second, and in this case, we do not see a graph so stable in the frames per second because it varied greatly between 60 and 50 but still maintained very high frames. Then although it does not have such a high stability, if it maintains good fluidity, definitely giving us a very good performance. If you want a cell phone to play that does not sacrifice other experiences, this is an excellent choice. And finally, in Henshin Impact by default is in medium quality, but for the test again we went to the highest, we went to very high with high visual effects, high 60 frames per second, very high motion blur, so we put an ultra complex test. And again, the performance really is super remarkable. Let's say it gives us a very good experience for gamers, as it gives us a very good stability, very good fluidity. Definitely is a very good processor that comes with an excellent cooling system with multiple layers that definitely shows in the experience recording. The screen came to have a temperature of 45.6 degrees Celsius, which is remarkably high, but consider that we had very high visual effects and we did not notice that the game was frozen or suffered recording the screen. Without recording the screen, after 6 minutes of continuing to play, the device lowered its temperature to 42.2 degrees Celsius, so it really manages very well its temperature without recording the screen, so it can give you prolonged gaming sessions without any problem. The gaming experience is really perfect. See, so there is no doubt, as a conclusion, is a device that will give you a very high performance without sacrificing other things. The only thing that will cut will be the price, so it is an excellent choice, keeps good cameras, good video recording in general without becoming a specialist in that, but really has a very good experience, good screen, good cameras, good software experience. Sincerely, is one of the best options you will find in this price range. For now, we have come to the end of this video. I hope you liked. If so, you know you can indicate it, and see you next time.